Hello everybody, welcome back to Reading for Vocabulary. Are you ready to begin studying? The topic for today is kind of interesting, and you've probably experienced it in your life, right? We're talking about a home away from home. A home away from home. We're going to focus on moving to a new home. Have you ever moved in your life, right? Did you move to a new apartment or a new house? Maybe you moved to a new neighborhood or a new city, or maybe even a new country, right? So people nowadays move a lot, right? You think about it, and you know, sure, there are some people who live in one place all their life, but it's becoming more and more common for people to move to different places and live in a few different places when they grow up. I probably am a very extreme example of that. By the time I finished high school, I had moved about 5 times. My family moved about 5 times. Why? Because my father's a 지질학자, right? A geologist. So his company sent him, geologist, his company sent him to many different places in the world. So when I was growing up, you know, I lived in New Mexico, Wisconsin, North Carolina, Papua New Guinea, Colorado, Arizona, Nevada. We moved so many different times because of my dad's job. So maybe your dad's job or your mom's job takes you to different places. Or maybe when you go to school, when you go to college, you might go to another city or maybe even a different country. By the way, if you get a chance to go to another country to study for college, take that chance. Look for that opportunity. It's a very good experience for you. Anyway, that's the topic, moving to new homes. So nowadays, it's not unusual for us to think of any place can be a new home. We can move just about anywhere and live anywhere. So that's what we're going to read about. But first, let's take a look at the vocabulary. Our first word is New York loves ugly. That's not our first word. It's just an interesting t-shirt. A person whose home is in a certain area. So New York, of course, is a very famous town. They're very famous for their spirit, right? People who live in New York, they can call themselves citizens of New York. Okay, usually though we use citizen for country. For example, people who live in New York are citizens of America. They are American citizens. People who live in Seoul are usually Korean citizens, right? If your passport has the name of the country on it, right, you are a citizen of that country. If you have a Korean passport, you are a citizen of Korea. If you have an American passport, you are a citizen of America, and the same for every country in the world. So, which country are you a citizen of? Okay, next one. Do you know this place? Machu Picchu, right? This is an event that a person goes through. If you go visit a world famous place like this, what do you say? It's an experience, an experience. So if you go and see Machu Picchu in Peru, or you go see the pyramids in Egypt, or you go see the Eiffel Tower in Paris, France, that is an experience that you will remember. Experience, 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 experience. Okay, so probably you have good experiences of traveling. Maybe your family has taken vacations to different places, right? You have good experiences of your traveling. Next one, to fit in naturally. To fit in naturally means to belong. Of course, these apples, do they belong together? You might say, well, the red one doesn't belong. But maybe it does. It depends on how you look at it. They're all apples, right? So it belongs together because they're all apples. But maybe other people say it doesn't belong because it's red and the others are green. But to fit in naturally means to belong somewhere. It belongs with the others. Of course, if you go to the supermarket, apples are in one section. Sure, you have green apples, red apples, yellow apples in different places, but they're all together kind of in the same area. They belong in the same area. This is an interesting idea. Do you know this? For a type of living thing to change slowly over time. So we think about this. When you think about the age of the earth, how old is the Earth, right? 4.5 billion years old. We can't even imagine that time. How long has life been on Earth? Since at least 3.5 billion years, right? Now, over that long time, life has changed into many different forms. What do we call that process? This is usually the picture that they usually show. How accurate it is, you know, maybe we don't know. But it shows that monkey-like creatures changing slowly into human beings, we say evolve. Now, of course, monkeys did not evolve into human beings. Monkeys are cousins to human beings. This creature doesn't live anymore. It's extinct. It's gone. But all living creatures have evolved over time into different forms and shapes. If you look at horses, go back and look at the evolutionary history of horses, or very interesting, look at whales. It's very interesting how whales, their ancestors came on land and then went back to the sea. They evolved. They changed over time. So it's a very interesting idea about the world, and evolution was first proposed by Darwin, Charles Darwin, in 1860 something. I can't remember the exact date, but of course his idea was very controversial. But nowadays most scientists, more than 90% of scientists say that this is fact. It's not a theory anymore. It actually happened, and when you think about it, it makes sense. Okay, so evolve. Okay, so next one, to create copies of oneself. So when adult animals have babies, what are they doing? They are reproducing. So mama sheep will have a baby sheep, right? A lamb. Okay, so reproduce, reproduce, reproduce. Reproduce means to make copies of oneself, okay? So when animals grow up, they become older, they become adults, then they can reproduce and have babies of their own. Next one. To increase. Okay, so something is increasing. What does it mean? It means rise. So we can see a rise. Usually we use this for charts when you see business people using this type of graph to show an increase in sales, perhaps. So they say there's been a rise in sales. Okay, a rise, to increase. Rise is a verb, by the way, but also a noun, because I said there has been a rise. But you could also say sales have risen. Okay, rise, rose, risen. Because as a verb, rise is irregular. We say rise, rose, risen. Okay. But sometimes rise can also be a noun. Okay, next one. Wow, this is a very probably European city, very colorful, very interesting place. But if you look at it, you also get the impression there's so many people there. Wow, it's really a lot of people. So to fill with animals or people is to populate, populate, populate. So a long time ago, there weren't that many people, but people, increased. The numbers of people increased and increased. The numbers of people rose. And the earth was populated with human beings, okay? And of course, all sorts of other types of animals. Next one. A group of people sharing certain traits and beliefs. If we look at the American Indian here, we know that American Indians share certain beliefs and behaviors. They do the same things and they believe many different things. Of course, different tribes have different beliefs. I'm not saying all American Indians are the same, that's not true. But a certain group, certain tribes, like the Apache or the Cherokee or the Mohican, right? They would have, in their tribes, they would have the same beliefs or the same traditions. And of course, the same is true with countries. Korean culture. I just gave you the answer. Culture. It's a group of people who share the same beliefs and behaviors. Actually, culture, when you think about it, culture isn't really, you don't say culture is people. Say culture is the beliefs or behaviors of a certain group of people, right? It's what they do. So Korean culture is different from American culture, which is different from French culture, okay? So different areas, different groups of people have different culture or different cultures. Okay, next one. Number 9, standing straight, not upside down. So if you're standing straight up, right, you are upright, upright. Now, this is important, of course, when you're shipping something. If you're sending something in the mail, you write on one side of the package, this side up, right? You want it to be upright. You don't want it to be upside down because that could possibly damage what you have in the container. Also, it's more natural for us to be upright, right? When we're walking around. We don't walk around on our hands upside down. That makes our head hurt. Okay, next one. 10, a group of people living and working together. So a group of people living and working together. What do we call them? We call that society. And society is a singular noun. Okay, society. So not it, not them, but it. What do we call a group of people living and working together? What do we call it? We call it society. And societies have different sizes. Right? A society can be as small as your family, but usually we talk about society in terms of like as big as a city or as big as a nation, or sometimes a global society. So the entire human population in the world, we can also think of it as a society. It depends on what our purpose is. What is our intention? Do we just want to focus on a small group, or are we talking about issues that affect a very big group? So society, when we think about it, can be small or big. But usually we think about it as the society in which we live, right? What is the the behavior or the beliefs or the customs, the culture of the people that we're living in with. What is the society? And of course, what are the laws of society? That's something we have to think about as well. The laws, what do we have to do to obey the laws? What are the expectations of society? What are we expected to do in society? So society is basically the group of people in which we live. Okay. 11. Whoa, what's wrong with these people? They look very strange. They have really long legs. The idea here is for most of the time we say generally. Generally. So if we talk about basketball players, we can make general statements. Most of the time, basketball players are very tall. They have very long legs that look like golf clubs. I'm sorry. No, they don't. But usually basketball players are very tall, generally. Not all. Sometimes you can find short basketball players who are very good at passing the ball or getting the ball down the court. But generally, usually, for most of the time, basketball players are very tall. And we can make general statements about different groups of people. But again, be careful about making general statements because you can always find exceptions, right? It's not always the same. Okay, next one. A long period of almost no food. So these people are looking for food and they endure a long period when no food has been grown. Maybe it's too hot. There's no water. So they can't grow food. We call that time a famine. Famine is a period of time that no food is available. A long time ago, of course, when people couldn't grow crops or there were no animals to hunt, right? It was too hot. There was no water, no food. So we call that period a famine. Nowadays, of course, famines can be caused by the supply chain breaking down, right? People getting food to a certain place, and that could also cause a famine. Next one. Wanting to know more. So this little boy is very curious. Most children are very curious. Generally, children are very curious about the world around them. They are curious. They want to know more about the world. Okay. Next one. To run away from. Run! Right? There's a bull. I don't know if you can't see the head, but this is a bull with big horns. And these guys, I think they're in Spain, perhaps Pamplona, where they have every year they run away from the bull, which is crazy. You know, a bunch of people will get ready, they'll release a bull, and these guys will run down the street running away from a bull. Why? Okay, well, different people have different hobbies, I guess. Okay, so to run away from means to flee. To flee, to run away. Now, flee is an irregular verb, so we say flee, fled, fled. Flee, fled, fled. These men fled from the bull. Okay, they are fleeing from the bull. Okay, next one. To come from a source. Now, to come from a source, it means descend, to descend. And we're talking about evolution here. It's a strange picture, but I think what they're getting at is that on a chain, right, there's a watch that descends from the chain. But to come from a source, we can also think about the word evolution. Remember the picture evolution? We saw the monkey type creature and then we saw a human being. So usually especially when we talk about evolution, we say that the modern creatures, the modern animals have descended from a previous animal. Usually, not always, but generally, these animals are extinct. They no longer live. We can't see them nowadays. Sometimes they still exist in certain cases, but usually our ancestors are extinct, right? There are no more early humans that are alive. People have to go and dig up their bones, right? For the ancestors of human beings. But we descend from some source, from a source. Every living thing has descended from one source. Okay, next one. In a single group. So in a single group, we can say together. So if the dog and the cat are in a single group, they look like they're friends. That's a very interesting picture. They're together, right? They're together. They're pals. They're buddies. They're together in a group. Okay, so you're together with your friends. Probably when you go out to play, you're together in a group. Okay, let's go over the words and see how well you remember the vocabulary. Number 1, hang gliding. Remember hang gliding from a previous lesson, right? That's where you're flying, soaring through the air on a bar with a wing above you. Hang gliding is a great what? A, citizen, B, bridge, C, experience, D, culture. Which word fits? Well, is hang gliding a great citizen? It's a citizen of a country? That doesn't make sense. Is it a great bridge? That doesn't make sense either. Is it a great experience? Remember, an experience is something that you remember. It's a memorable happening in your life. Something, an event, or something that happens in your life. That's a great experience. So hang gliding is a great experience, isn't it? Because, wow, that'd be great. I haven't done it yet. I would like to someday, but it would be a great experience. And D, of course, hang gliding is not a great culture. That doesn't make sense. Hang gliding, something you do, an event that you remember, it's a great experience, or it's an experience. Number 3, modern birds, beep, from dinosaurs. Okay, there's actually 2 words from the vocabulary list that we could use here, but only one of those is here. Thank goodness, because if both of them were here, we would have to choose both, but there's only one. So, A, populated, B, evolved, C, reproduced, and D, created. Let me tell you the word that could fit here, but it's not on the answer list, and that, of course, is descend. We could use descended. Modern birds descended from dinosaurs. That would fit, but it's not one of our choices. But remember when I was describing or explaining the meaning of this word descend, we just did this, right, a couple slides ago, or I think it was the last word, descend. I gave you the example of, right, all living things descended from a previous animal. And we saw that diagram, we saw that idea with which word? Of course, it was with evolved, evolve. So we could use either word. Modern birds evolved from dinosaurs, or modern birds descended from dinosaurs. It means the same thing. Not populated, not reproduced, not created, those don't fit. We're talking about, a previous life form or a previous type of animal that gives birth, that reproduces, but over a long time, and changes into another type of animal. And that's evolution. That's also descending from another species or another type of animal. So modern birds evolved from dinosaurs. And by the way, that's a very interesting idea. If you think, oh, dinosaurs are no longer in the world, they're all extinct, not true. Birds are a type of dinosaur, and we can see them every day. Very interesting. Okay, 5, school is strange. I don't feel like what? I don't feel like if you think school is strange, you don't what? I don't feel like what? I don't feel like I A, belong, B, make, C, empty, D, slip. So if you think some place is strange or a group of people is strange, you don't fit in, right? You don't belong. I don't feel like I belong. Maybe you do belong, but you don't feel like I belong. That's too bad. You have to make some friends. If you make friends, you get used to the people there, you find out, oh, they're good people, then you feel like you belong in a place, right? But if you feel strange about the people you're with, you don't feel like you have anything in common, it's hard to talk to them, then you feel like you don't belong, okay? Not make, not empty, not slip, those don't make sense. The best one is belong. 7, South America has a really interesting what? immigration, B, culture, C, famine, or D, hat? Well, famine is not interesting. It's terrible. It's horrible. So that doesn't work, right? It has a really interesting hat, just one. South America has an interesting hat. It's a really big hat that it puts on the whole continent. Now, that's crazy, right? Has an interesting immigration. We don't think of immigration as being interesting. We think of immigration as being a pain in the butt, right? It's very difficult, right? So the only one, South America has a really interesting culture. That would fit because the beliefs and the customs in South America are very interesting. But by the way, South America has many different countries in South America. And of course, there are different cultures in each of those different countries. And maybe even inside those countries, there might be different cultures inside the country. So South America has really interesting cultures would be more accurate, right? But you could, if you're talking about all the culture or the same beliefs and behaviors that all people from South America seem to generally show, then that could be possible too. But it'd be more accurate to say there are many different cultures in South America, and those cultures are interesting. Okay, that wraps up the vocabulary section of this lesson. Let's take a short break. We'll come back and look at the reading. Okay, welcome back from the break. Let's begin the reading section together. Now, of course, the title is Home Away from Home. So, let's see what the topic is in this passage. What are we going to be reading about? Obviously, something to do with homes, right? Let's read the first passage. A home is not just the house or apartment you live in. It is the place where you belong. Home is not always where you were born either. Every day, people travel across the world and make new homes in new places. It's a very interesting point there. Home, we have the difference between a home and a house, right? Sometimes people wonder about that, or maybe they get confused, right? This is my house, right? This is my home. Sometimes people use them in the same meaning, but actually there is a little bit of a different feeling between the two words, right? A house sounds kind of cold. It's a little bit of a colder feeling. A house is just a building. It's a structure. It has your furniture. Maybe it has your things in it. But a house, I don't feel like a strong connection to a house. But if I use the word home, then all of a sudden I get a warm feeling. I think, it's very comfortable. I belong there. I belong in that home. Okay? That's where my parents are when I'm young, right? It's where my mom and my dad live, my brothers and my sisters. They're my family. I belong with my family. I feel good when I'm with my family. When I get older, my home is where my wife and maybe my children are. It's where I go home to relax, right? And to get rid of a stress. So that's my home, okay? A house is just a building, right? So it's very interesting to think about that. And you may think of it this way. I live in a house in Seoul, but my home is in Busan. That's an interesting idea. That means that they grew up in Busan, their family lives in Busan, they feel comfortable in their family's home, they don't feel so comfortable in their home in Seoul, right? So that's an interesting idea. My house is in Seoul, but my real home is in Busan, right? It's all about the feeling. What kind of feeling do you get between these two words, okay? And of course, apartment is very common. People will say, my house is an apartment, but technically a house is one building where one family lives in that house, and usually there's a yard around the house. Not always, but usually. Apartment, of course, is just, a box in the sky in a very tall building. Okay, but is it your home? Have you made your apartment your home? Have you made your house your home? In college, some students will make their dormitory room their home, right? It depends on how they feel about it. Okay, anyway, it's a place where they belong. I belong here. I feel comfortable here. That's my home. Home is not always where you were born either, right? Of course, you know the word hometown. Hometown is where you were born, right? But it's not necessarily where you live, right? I have a hard time because people say, where is your hometown? So my hometown is Silver City, New Mexico. New Mexico is a state in America. And people say, oh, is that where you grew up? No. My family moved when I was 6 months old. So where I was born, that's not my home. I've been to Silver City once when I was an adult. And, it was just a short time, a couple of days. So I really don't know this city in New Mexico. Well, my family was only there for a short time. I happened to be born there, right? The same thing with my brother. My brother was born in Wisconsin, another state, but he doesn't remember it because we moved when he was just a couple years old, right? So home is not always where you were born, right? It's where you feel you belong. So every day people travel across the world and make new homes in new places. And this, of course, is becoming more and more common in modern society. Look at me. I grew up in America, many different states, and also outside of America, but now I feel my home is in Seoul, right? Because that's where I live now. It's where my wife is. I feel comfortable there. That's my home. And many Koreans will immigrate to Australia, New Zealand, America, places in Europe. So people will travel and make new homes in new countries. And this is very common every day. This is what's going on. Humankind has been traveling like this for thousands of years. Thousands of years people have been doing this. Not a large part of the population is becoming more common nowadays, but a long time ago, think about it. For thousands of years, people have been moving. They've been exploring new places. Groups of people will go and settle and make new areas their home. In fact, many scientists believe our original home was in Africa, and that humankind descended from a small group of ancient travelers. Of course, that's most scientific thought now, is that humans came out of Africa. Humans first evolved, modern human beings first evolved in Africa from a lot of different pre-human types of creatures, right? There were many different types of creatures before modern Homo sapiens, human beings, came into existence. And they were in Africa, just a few thousand individuals at first. And that humankind descended from a small group of ancient travelers, okay? So, the original home of humankind was in Africa. That's where human beings first appeared. And then from a small group of ancient travelers who left Africa, all of humankind then, well, of course, the people in Africa are still humankind, but the people spread all over the world, okay? And that's an interesting idea. It's very fascinating looking at history like that. Long before modern humans, there were other kinds of animals that were much like people. These weren't monkeys or apes, but rather animals that walked upright and used tools. These creatures evolved into modern humans about 200,000 years ago. It's a long time. Okay, so what have we got here? Long before modern humans, there were other kinds of animals that were much like people. It's kind of what I mentioned before. In Africa, there were lots of different animals that resembled people, but they weren't people. And if you go back and you read the names of these people, the names of these creatures, it's a little 힘들어 to read, right? Maybe a little difficult to pronounce, a lot of Latin and Greek names, right? But basically, you can also call them nicknames like tool makers, upright, people who walked upright, people with large heads, people who ate just the branches off trees. Were they people? Were they human beings? No, but they were very similar to what we think of as modern human beings now. And from these groups of animals, right, they weren't monkeys or apes. A lot of people, when they talk about evolution, they think, I can't believe I was descended from a chimpanzee. No, people are not descended from chimpanzees. People are cousins to chimpanzees. Human beings and chimpanzees had a common ancestor a long, long time ago, right? And they split, okay? So then you have humans, you have chimpanzees, you have modern apes. We're all cousins. Orangutans, other types of monkeys. These are all cousins. We all have a similar ancestor a long, long time ago, more than 20,000 years ago. right? When you're talking about the common ancestor between humans and chimpanzees, you're going back a couple million years, okay? Several million years ago. Okay, so they weren't monkeys or apes, but rather animals that walked upright and used tools. These animals are gone. They don't live anymore, right? That's a long time ago. They've all died out, right? Whether because they couldn't find food or because of competition from other animals or from their descendants, they're gone. So we can only find their bones in the ground and think and imagine how they lived, right? But those animals are gone. These creatures evolved, okay, into modern humans, okay? So these creatures changed over time, different environmental conditions, Sometimes there was famine, sometimes there were different conditions, jungle, maybe jungles disappeared and plains became more common. There's a lot of different theories about why these animals changed into modern human beings. But the first modern human beings emerged or came about 200,000 years ago. Okay, that's a very long time ago. Just even thinking 200,000 years ago, it's almost impossible for us to imagine. Now think about a million years ago, right? Or several million years ago when monkeys and human beings split. That's a very long time. Okay, let's continue. A small group of modern humans, maybe only around 150 of them, left Africa about 70,000 years ago. Over the next 50,000 years, they populated the rest of the world. Excuse me. Okay, so that's interesting. Remember, modern humans came into existence about 200,000 years ago, and they were in Africa. Well, scientific theories, we're not sure because people didn't write things down. We have no written record from that time. But about 70,000 years ago. So modern humans lived in Africa for about 130,000 years. Then about 70,000 years ago, the idea is that about 150 of them, of these modern humans, not a very big group, right? That's a small group. They could all fit on a modern airplane, right? They left Africa. Of course, they weren't on an airplane. They were walking. They left Africa about that time ago. So then over the next 50,000 years, a very long time, they populated the rest of the world. They spread out, right? And they had children, and their children grew up and then went along. Remember, 50,000 years is a very long time, many, many generations spreading out all over the world. By the way, I just want to make a note. This is one theory, right? This reading passage says that one group left Africa, but other scientific theories think that several waves of human beings left Africa. So there was an earlier wave, and then there was a later wave of humans that left Africa. So it's also very interesting. But according to the reading passage, 150 modern humans left Africa about 70,000 years ago. I'm just saying that's not 100%. Not all scientists believe that. There's another theory that thinks that there are other ways. But don't be confused. That's the theory in this reading passage. Okay. South Asia. Now, here we have just a list of different areas and when they were populated by human beings. So South Asia was populated 50,000 years ago. So it took them 20,000 years to get to South Asia. Australia, 40,000 years ago. Okay, so it took them another 10,000 years to get to Australia. Europe, Korea, and Japan, 30,000 years ago. So they were settled 30,000 years ago. And then lastly, North America, either 30 or 15,000 years ago. And of course, you may know about the theory of human beings crossing the ice. The Earth has been very cold in its past, a long time ago. And we talk about climate change nowadays, but we don't realize that, 20,000, 30,000 years ago, most of the Earth was covered in ice and snow and huge glaciers, right? Talk about climate change. Okay. So anyway, during that time, human beings were able to walk across from Asia into Alaska, from northeastern Russia, just right over the ice into Alaska. There wasn't any water there. It was all frozen. So then that's how they got to America. That's one theory. Another theory is that they came over earlier in canoes. Right? The Polynesians were able to populate the entire Pacific Ocean. So people say, well, maybe they came in different waves because they're different times. But anyways, that's getting into very detailed science. But it's very fascinating. It's very interesting when you get, if now read a book about it, or if you get older, it's a very interesting subject to start reading about. There's a lot of good books about these theories. Okay. These early humans traveled from place to place looking for food and shelter. Now, most cultures make a single place their home. Okay, so a long time ago, early humans, of course, they're traveling from place to place. And think about it, not many human beings in the world. There's a lot of wide open spaces. There's a lot of opportunities out there, right? Of course, life is very difficult at that time, and it's very difficult to go from one place to another, but it's out there. If there's a lot of people in your area and there's a lot of competition and some groups are behaving badly, you may want to go to a place where there are no people and take your family or your large group with you and go settle in a new place. And that's what humans did. They traveled from place to place. Why? They're looking for food, they're looking for shelter, they're looking for good places, good weather, things like that. Now, most cultures make a single place their home. So a lot of cultures have stopped wandering around, right? And of course that happens. You know, some people find a good place to stay, they're going to stay there. And over time, they develop their own unique culture. And that's what happens. So most cultures make a single place their home. Okay. They live, eat, and reproduce there, creating their own society. These societies generally stay put, but with the rise of modern transportation, humans are on the move again. So what this passage is telling us is that a long, long time ago, it was common for early humans to spread out, to move. But as humans spread out and move, some places they found were good and they wanted to stay there. They stayed put. Stay put means to remain there, because they live there, they can find good food there, they can have children there, they don't need to leave. Right? They create their own society in this area. So these societies generally, they don't want to leave, because once you get a society of several thousands of people, you know, it'd be very difficult to move them. And the only reason to move them is for some terrible event like a war or famine or something. But if conditions are good, why leave? Stay there. So they stayed put. But with the rise of modern transportation, in other words, the development of modern transportation, or as modern transportation has increased or become easier, humans are on the move again. Now it's not that hard to, you know, pack up your house and ship all your belongings and take an airplane and go to a new city, you know, on a different side of the country, or go to a new country for a few years. A lot of people will do that for their job. Their company will send them to another country for a couple of years, maybe 2 years, 3 years, maybe 5 years, maybe 10 years. And people get comfortable in the new country. Maybe they want to stay there, right? That's not unusual. Because of modern transportation, it's becoming easier to do that. So many people are doing that. There's more opportunities. It might be more exciting. You know, there's lots of different reasons people will move to another place. Like ancient humans, modern humans travel to find food and shelter, but also for many other reasons. Some flee from wars and famine. So this is kind of talking about what I just mentioned before. So like ancient humans, modern humans. So in a similar way, modern humans are like ancient humans. They travel to find food and shelter, right? But also for many other reasons. Nowadays, most modern people aren't worried about going to a new place to find food. You just go to the supermarket, there's food, okay? That's in most of the world. Not everywhere, but most of the world. So that's not really a big consideration. Shelter, again, we don't have to worry about that. Almost anywhere we go in the world, there's already buildings already built. There's places we could buy. There's apartments, condos, studio apartments, whatever. It's not that hard to find shelter nowadays. But also for many other reasons, right? Like I said before, maybe it's interesting. Maybe they want to change in their life. But of course, the main reason probably is economic, right? A lot of people move to get a better job, to earn more money. Some people move for better educational reasons, right? They want their children to go to better schools. So there's a lot of different reasons why modern people move that ancient people didn't think about, right? Ancient people weren't worried about education for their kids, right? But nowadays, people are. But some flee from wars and famine. Those are other reasons. So some other reasons, and fortunately most of us don't experience this, but for those human beings who do, it's very terrible. Some people have to run away from war and famine. For example, in the Middle East, a lot of people are fleeing Syria to go to live in another country because their country is involved in a civil war. In Africa, this happens quite a lot. People immigrate. They want to go to a new country or a new area. Others travel because their homes have been destroyed, and a number of travelers are just curious and looking for new experiences. So others travel because their homes have been destroyed. Think about in recent years about natural disasters, tsunamis, earthquakes, volcanoes, right? Sometimes floods. Homes will be destroyed. People say, no, it's too dangerous to live here. I don't want to live here anymore. Had bad experiences. They want to move to some place where these things don't happen. A number of, that means some people are just curious. They just want to look around. They're looking for new experiences, right? A lot of people, actually a lot of people I think from America, a lot of young people from America like to come to Korea because it's a new experience and they can work here for a year or two. They go back to their country and they've had a good experience, hopefully, in Korea, and they can also make money at the same time. So, people are curious, they want to know more about the world, and they want to have new experiences. So they do that. A lot of Korean young people will go to Australia on a working holiday for a good experience. So there's also reasons for people to travel. Whatever your reasons, it doesn't matter. Whatever your reason for traveling, remember that we are all citizens of the world. The world is our home, and we are all here together. So it doesn't matter why you're traveling. You could be fleeing from a war, from natural disasters. Maybe you're interested in economic or educational opportunities. Maybe you're just curious and you want to know more about the world in which you live. The idea is, remember, we are all citizens of the world. And that's an idea that's kind of growing, I guess, in the last several decades. That, it's not just we're a citizen of one country, because the actions of one country affect the lives of people all over the world. So we're really all together on this planet, right? We only have one Earth. We have to all be together. We have to realize that our society is worldwide now. Right? We can communicate with people across the world. We can travel to other places in the world very quickly. So a lot of things that we do can affect other people all over the world. So we are all citizens of the world. The world is our home together. We're all here together. So we should all work together and live together well. And that's basically the idea in this passage. Okay. Let's talk about the comprehension questions. This story is about, what is the main idea of this story? What were we talking about in this reading passage? This story is about where people live, B, different cultures, C, ancient people, or D, the history of human traveling. The story is about where people live. They talk about where people live a little bit, but not very specifically, right? They said, ancient people started off in Africa and they spread throughout the world. But that was about it. It wasn't very much, a lot of detail about where people live. So that's not the answer. This story is about different cultures. No, culture was mentioned very briefly, but there was no description of any specific culture or any differences between cultures. We didn't really hear about that. This story is about ancient people. Well, yes, the story did mention ancient people, but there was also a lot of information about modern people. So it wasn't just about ancient people. The history of human traveling. That was the answer, right? This story is about the history of human traveling because it talked about, human beings originated, right? They came into existence in Africa about 200,000 years ago, and then they started traveling. And it kind of talked about the history, right? When did humans leave Africa? When did they go to these different regions of the world? And it's also talking about nowadays, what do people do nowadays? How do they travel, or how easy is it for them to travel? And also, what are the reasons for people traveling? So all of this has to do with the history of human traveling, the history of travel for human beings. Okay, so it's an interesting story. Okay, let's go on to number 2, modern people. So modern people, what do modern people do? Modern people, A, populated Asia about 70,000 years ago. B, all live in Africa. C, evolved from monkeys and apes. D, evolved about 200,000 years ago. Which is true? Well, right away we can see it says modern people and it says 70,000 years ago. That doesn't fit. Modern people populated Asia 70,000 years ago. Those weren't modern people, right? Those are ancient people. That doesn't make any sense. Modern people all live in Africa? No, that's not true. Modern people live in Africa and all of the other areas of the world as well. So that's not true. Okay, so we can only find modern people in Africa. No, no, that's not true, as you know. Okay, C. Modern people evolved from monkeys and apes. No, I made a special point about this, right? Modern people did not evolve from monkeys and apes. Modern people and monkeys and apes are cousins. They share a common ancestor who is now extinct. We can't find that animal anymore. It's long, long since dead. All of those animals have gone out of existence millions of years ago, right? We did not evolve from monkeys and apes. Monkeys and apes are our cousins, okay? So that's not true. And D, evolved about 200,000 years ago. It doesn't say evolved from what, okay? It just says when, and that's true. Modern people evolved about 200,000 years ago. That's a long time ago, right? And you think modern people, but when we're talking about evolutionary scale, 200,000 years ago doesn't seem that long ago. When we talk about populating Asia 70,000 years ago, that doesn't make sense. But when we say modern people evolved about 200,000 years ago, that does make sense because there's been no change, right? If you went back 200,000 years ago and you looked at, from an evolutionary point of view, and you looked at the people living in Africa, they would be the same as you and I. Okay, that's what we mean by modern people in an evolutionary time scale. Okay, okay. So modern people evolved about 200,000 years ago, and we haven't really changed that much since. Okay, next, 3. Most modern cultures, what? A, travel from place to place. B, come from North America. C, stay in one place. D, live, eat, and reproduce in many different places. So which one is true? Okay, most modern cultures travel from place to place. No, modern cultures, kind of tend to stay in one place, right? Koreans don't move to, they don't move, in the 1800s to Japan, and then all the Koreans decide, okay, well, let's go to Hawaii for a little while, and then let's go to Australia. No, they stay in one place in Korea, right? So that's not the answer. Most modern cultures come from North America. No, that doesn't make sense either. Okay, that's not true. Most modern cultures stay in one place. That's true because, of course, nowadays too, it's hard for one culture to just move to another place because most places in the world are already inhabited by other cultures, right? If you're, for example, if you are ancient Persia, right, it might be easy for you to move to a new place where there aren't many people or the people don't have a very developed culture. But nowadays, the people in Iran aren't going to be able to move to Iraq because there's already a culture there, right? They're not going to be able to move to Afghanistan because there's already a culture there. So most modern cultures stay in one place, right? They stay where they are. That's only one reason. Of course, they're also comfortable where they are. Their history, their ideas, their traditions are connected to that place where they are. So they don't move around. And live, eat, and reproduce in many different places, that would be strange. That would be like, well, I live in Korea, but I eat in India, and I reproduce in Australia. That's really strange. Okay, so that's not right. Okay, that's not correct. Okay, so the next one, number 4. Sorry about that. Number 4, modern humans travel what? Modern humans travel A, for many reasons, B, to find war and famine, C, to destroy new homes, and D, to forget about their experiences. So why do modern humans travel? Let's start from the bottom here. Modern humans travel, D, to forget about their experiences? That doesn't make sense. Why do you want to forget about your experiences? You travel to make new experiences, to remember things. Modern humans travel to destroy new homes. That doesn't make sense. Why would they do that? Modern humans travel to find war and famine. No, that's crazy. That's the opposite, right? They're fleeing war and famine. They don't want to find war and famine. They want to get away from war and famine. So that doesn't make sense. A, Modern humans travel for many reasons. And we talked about that. What are the reasons, right? The reasons are they're fleeing war and famine, okay? Or they're looking for different opportunities, right? Or they're curious about the world. They want to travel and have new experiences, right? So there are many different reasons why modern humans travel. Okay, well, that's an interesting passage, and think about that. You know, in your life, you will probably live in several different places, right? You live in a place now with your family. You may have moved already, but maybe your dad or your mom will get a new job somewhere else, and you'll travel to that place. When you get older and you go to college, you might travel to a new city. Hopefully, I hope you have the experience. Take the chance if you get the opportunity, you might be able to go to college in another country, even for just 1 year or 6 months. That would be great. So you have a chance to travel there. When you get your job, when you are working, your job might require you to go to another place. Or you might think, I'm interested in working in another country, and you apply for a job in another country. That's also possible too. So you have many opportunities, many reasons to travel to different places. And I hope that I hope that you do be able to travel, because traveling is also a very good education and is a very good experience for you. Okay, well, that about wraps it up for this lesson. We'll see you guys next time. Take care.